Hello, welcome to Chapter 3, where we're going to talk about doing business in global markets. And what we're going to talk about is the dynamic of the global market. Why should we trade with other nations? How do you get involved in global trade? Strategies for reaching those global markets. Forces affecting the trade in global markets, trade protectionism, and the future of global trade. All right, for the learning objectives, we have looking at the role of comparative advantage and absolute advantage, explaining the importance of importing and exporting, and also the key terms in global business, illustrate different strategies used in reaching global markets, evaluate the forces that affect trade in global markets, debate the advantages and disadvantages of trade protectionism, and then discuss the changing landscapes of the global market. All right, so the real question is, why should you engage in global trade? And this right here is the answer. Because the world population of 8 billion makes it a huge market for potential customers. If you look at where you're living now, how many people do live in your town? Comparatively speaking, not that many. If you only did business with your town versus greater Minnesota, you're needlessly limiting your ability and limiting your customer base. The global market's even bigger than that. So two key terms, you have importing and exporting. Importing is meaning you're buying products from another country, so you're bringing things in. Exporting is selling products to another country. That means you're taking what you're producing here and selling it abroad. All right, so just like anything else, there's not an even distribution of population. As you look, almost 60% of the entire world's population is in Asia. In America, North America accounts for 7.6%. So as you can see, there's a variety of different markets, and what comes with that is different tastes, preferences, and needs. And this is showing the population growth in the world. It's expected to grow to 9.28 billion by 2050. That's around 75 million more people a year and 1.5 billion more than our current population. So that's the trend. And then at 2050, we're expecting it to level off. So, all right, so Forbes does a ranking every year, and this is the current ranking of the best countries for business. And it's determined by using business climate, the amount of red tape, corruption, property rights, innovation of 150 different nations. And the U.S. came in number 17, and these are the top 10. All right, now this is the next, and it's talking about the world's billionaires. The United States has 724, which is the most out of any country in the world. So really, what is the difference between these if you're taking a look at them? Now, China has 626. They're ranked number 2, and you can kind of see that simply because China has the largest population in the world, right? So it's not necessarily a per capita comparison. It's just how many total do you have? But also, India has a significant population as well. So you're looking at different things in these countries. Some of the things it's going to impact, not only is it population, but it's also regulation on businesses. Wages, salaries are much higher, and then the climate, the business climate is significantly better in the United States than in these other countries to induce and produce this level of wealth. All right, so why shouldn't nations trade with each other? It's really about resources and products. Not every country is going to have all of the resources that they need. Even a country like Venezuela that has a significant amount of natural resources, they still need technological resources from other countries like Japan. Global trade allows this to happen. And really what this allows countries to do is, instead of trying to do everything, they can focus on what they're best at and then produce more of it and trade that excess to other countries. So if I'm good at producing one thing, you're good at producing another, I produce my thing, you produce yours, and we trade. That way we get everything that we're going to need between the both of us. Free trade is really just the movement of goods and services between nations without political or economic barriers. So this is just me being able to trade with you and you being able to trade with me without the government coming in saying, no, you can't do that, or imposing some sort of tariff or fine or limitation. All right, so the pros and the cons of free trade. Pro is that the global market contains over 7.9 billion potential customers for goods and services. Productivity grows when countries produce goods and services in which they have an advantage. What that means is if you have an advantage producing whatever the case is, it might be corn. If you focus on growing corn, you're going to grow more of it, and you're going to be more productive per employee or for that product. Global competition and less costly imports keep prices down. So the more sellers you have in a market, the lower the price is. If you expand it to a global market, what that means is you're not just competing with your local neighbors, you're competing with people all over the world. And for the consumer, that means lower prices. Free trade inspires innovation for new products and keeps firms competitively challenged because you have to. If you're competing with one person, you don't have to be super innovative. If you're competing with thousands or tens of thousands of companies, you have to be very innovative. You have to stay ahead of the curve. Uninterrupted flow of capital gives countries access to foreign investments, which help keep interest rates low. So as you're doing the trading back and forth, this is allowing the money coming in, allowing an easier way to get financing so that you can grow your own infrastructure. So those are all the pros. Cons, you're looking at the domestic workers, especially in jobs like manufacturing, can lose their jobs due to increased imports or production. So because it's cheaper to produce in a different country, right? Because you're depressing the cost of doing things in countries like the U.S. where you have a higher wage, it's going to hurt the employees that are working here because more of those jobs are going to shift overseas simply because it's harder to compete against them. Workers may be forced to accept pay cuts from employers. Once again, to stay in business, you have to do something to reduce costs. And that reduced cost might end up being reducing the wage that you pay your employees. You can move overseas simply to mitigate those expenses. And then domestic companies can lose their comparative advantage when you're looking at foreign companies building advanced production operations in low-wage countries like we see in China and Vietnam. All right, this is something that's going to be on the test. A lot of students get this wrong. Make sure that you understand the concept clearly, okay? We're looking at comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Really, what this means is simple. If you compare yourself to another, in this case, country, what do you do best? That's comparative advantage. Amongst all the things, we do this better than just about anybody else. That is what you need to focus on. The idea David Ricardo put forward is this. A nation that does something really well should concentrate on that thing, produce it as efficiently as possible, and then all of the excess trade to somebody else, trade to a different country that needs that product. And then absolute advantage, the difference between this is simple. Comparative, I'm comparing myself against you. Absolute means absolute. I am the best at whatever it is. Okay, I have a monopoly position in producing some sort of specific product, either because I'm the only one that has access to it, or I can do it more efficiently than anyone else in the world. This is the same with, it might be like rare earth minerals, where they're only found in a few countries in the entire world. One, for instance, is Ukraine. Ukraine produces 70% of the neon in the entire world because that's where it's actually found. So they have an absolute advantage when it comes to producing neon, whereas a comparative advantage would be I can produce. Ukraine also produces a significant amount of crops. Well, there's a lot of other countries that produces crops as well. They might produce comparatively better than them, and they do, based on how much exports they have, but they don't have an absolute advantage. Not in crop production. They have a comparative advantage. All right, so the U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the world, and this is a graph showing how much we owe versus how much we owe and to whom. U.S. Treasury holdings in the billions. And you see, Japan actually holds the most of our debt. China number 2. What do you think the ramifications of this are? It's a good question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. All right, importing goods and services. Products that are widely available in one country may be unavailable in another. By working with producers in their neighboring country, people can become major importers. So one of the things that we don't really have in America is coffee. We don't really have the right situation in most of the United States to grow it, and to grow it at a level that we actually need. So most of our coffee actually comes from South America. This is importing. We are looking at bringing something in that we can't find here. Once again, it's an advantage of global trade. All right, the reverse of that is exporting goods and services. What this means is producing something locally and then selling it to foreign countries. Selling abroad can be easier due to less competition. Exporting provides a boost to the U.S. economy. It generates over 7,000 jobs in the U.S., and exports represent about 11% of the GDP and account for 9 million jobs total. So, as you can see, exporting and importing are two good things, because you are able to bring in things that you couldn't produce locally, and then you can produce things and have access to new markets to then push them out. And what's really interesting is one of the largest purchasers of snowblowers and snowplows is Saudi Arabia. You wouldn't think it, because it never snows there, right? They don't use it for snow. They use it for driveways to move the sand. So that's not something that they actually produce domestically. They just purchase from companies that actually produce it for snow. But it works the same whether you're moving snow or sand. And that's the reason it becomes a great fit for local companies. All right. To stay competitive, companies are looking to improve their social media marketing. And the reason why is because your generation is unique in how they interact with ads and companies. You're online more than any other generation. And so to get the messaging across, businesses are looking to tap into the influencing market and content creators to reach these new dynamics. All right, how do you measure global trade? Number one is you're looking at the balance of trade. So this is literally looking at everything that's coming into the country versus everything that is going out of the country. So if you take in more imports than you do exports, okay, that is an unfavorable position. You have a trade deficit. If you have a trade surplus, what that means is the value of the country's exports exceeds that of its imports. So surplus literally means that you're sending more out of the country than you're taking back in. That's all it means. It's not, neither one is a negative situation. If you take more in versus if you push more out, it's just what it is. So, and the reason why that matters is simply this: if I take more in, that means I'm purchasing. I purchase in U.S. dollars. What do you think has to happen with that money? So if I bought a whole bunch of stuff from China, they're holding U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar, to then get their money back or to buy more stuff or whatever, they have to purchase using U.S. dollars. So it doesn't matter that there's an imbalance in the balance of trade, because at the end of the day, that money just doesn't go off and get thrown in a pit. It gets recirculated through the economy, the global economy. So, but that's really what they're talking about when we're talking about balance of trade. Are we importing more than we're exporting? If we are, it's a trade surplus. If we are exporting, sending more out than we're importing, then it's a trade deficit. All right, and the next term we're going to talk about is balance of payments. And really what this is the difference between money coming into the country from exports. So we're selling it, right? So we get more more money coming in versus more money leaving from imports. So this is the balance of payments. So if you have more money flowing in, that's a favorable balance. If you have more money going out, that's an unfavorable balance. All right. Dumping is selling products in a foreign country at lower prices than those charged in the producing country. It's a kind of a dirty tactic, and it's actually outlawed in the United States. The best example of this is back in the 80s, the U.S. used to have quite a few television producers, and then Japanese companies drove them all out of business. And how they did it was very simple. They produced TVs, and they padded their revenue by increasing the sales in the Japanese market, and then sold below cost in the U.S. And what ended up happening was they killed all their competition in the United States, and then they raised the price of TVs. So that's what dumping is. It's selling at a lower price in the foreign market and using your domestic market to balance it out. Usually used to get a foothold into a new market. All right, the U.S. remains one of the largest exporting nations, even though it exports a much lower percentage of its products than other countries like China, Germany, and Japan. This is just a map of where we're actually trading and to who we're trading to. All right, so what are the two main arguments favoring expansion of U.S. businesses into global trade? Number one is that there's so many people in the global market. So that's significant. Another is the fact that by reaching out into global trade, what you're doing is you're allowing the purchase of more things that you wouldn't be able to produce locally. What's comparative advantage, and what are some examples of this concept at work in the United States? Comparative advantage, once again, this is something that I produce better than just about everybody else. An example of this is airplanes. Airplanes are very, very expensive to produce, especially large airlines where you're flying hundreds of people, and because of that, there's not very many companies that do it in the world, and we actually have some here. So that's one of the things that we have as comparative advantage. Also, agriculture, we are a leader in ag products. So those are a couple of examples. How are a nation's balance of trade and balance of payments determined? Really, it's very simple. You're looking at balance of trade is literally how many products are coming in versus how many products are going out. How many imports versus your exports. Balance of payments is the same thing, but this is looking at cash. How much money is coming in and how much money is going out. And then you can either have a favorable situation, which would be your exports are more than your imports, or an unfavorable, which is where you have more imports than exports. And then what is meant by the term dumping? That's where you sell a product in a foreign market cheaper than you would actually sell it in your domestic market. The whole idea behind this is that you would undercut foreign competitors to gain a foothold in that industry, possibly drive them out of business, and you're using your domestic market to prop up because you're losing money internationally, but you're making money domestically. And so what you're doing is you're using your domestic customers that are more captive to pay for your entrance into a new market. All right, that is it for this first section. See you in the next one.